Al Capone didn't fall because of a bullet. He fell because of a book. In the Underworld, the ledger is the single most dangerous object in the room. It's the only thing that remembers the truth in a world built on lies. Most crime bosses saw accounting as their biggest vulnerability. But Bumpy Johnson? He saw a weapon. When a rat started leaking his secrets, Bumpy didn't reach for a gun. He reached for a pen. He was about to prove that in Harlem, the deadliest trap isn't made of steel, it's made of paper. So, here's the problem. You know someone's talking. You know the leak is coming from inside the house. But you can't just start breaking legs and hope the right person confesses. That's messy. That's loud. And worst of all, it scares the real rat into hiding. If you want to catch a ghost, you don't chase it. You make it materialize. In the world of counterintelligence, this is a standard problem with a very specific solution. It's called a canary trap. Now, the name sounds fancy, but the mechanics are brutal. It's not about tricking someone into lying. It's about tricking them into telling a very specific version of the truth. Think of it like radioactive dye. You inject a different color into each suspect, wait for the leak to show up, and then check the color. Bumpy Johnson didn't have radioactive dye, but he had ledgers. He spent the next few nights in his office, crafting 4 separate books. To the untrained eye, they looked identical, same leather binding, same weight, same columns of numbers detailing the flow of money through Harlem. But inside was a masterclass in data manipulation. Ledger number 1 listed a counting house on 125th Street holding 50 grand. Ledger number 2 moved that same money to a warehouse in the Bronx. Ledger number 3 pointed to a basement in Queens. And ledger number 4? That one had a very special address, a shoe repair shop on 147th in Amsterdam, owned by a 73-year-old widow named Edna. This is where the genius kicks in. He wasn't just feeding them lies, he was watermarking the information. He created 4 parallel realities. In Vernon's reality, the money was at the shoe shop. In Clarence's reality, it was in the Bronx. It's simple probability. If the cops hit the Bronx, Clarence is the rat. If they hit Queens, it's Maurice. The beauty of the Canary Trap is that it removes all the guesswork. It turns a chaotic investigation into a simple matching game. You don't need a witness. You don't need a confession. You just need the cops to do their job. And Bumpy knew exactly how eager they were to do it. He distributed the information with surgical care. A file left on a desk for a moment too long. A car door left unlocked while he grabbed a coffee. He made it look like a mistake. He made it look like luck. Because he knew that a desperate man doesn't question his luck, he grabs it with both hands. All Bumpy had to do was wait. The trap was set. The die was in the water. Now, he just needed to see which color would stain the morning papers. Vernon Hodges stood by the black Cadillac on 127th Street. The door was unlocked. The ledger was right there on the back seat, half hidden under a newspaper. To Vernon, this looked like a mistake. A rare, careless slip from a man who never slipped. But in the cold language of game theory, this wasn't a mistake. It was a variable. Bumpy Johnson had deliberately introduced a piece of asymmetric information into the system. Vernon held the physical object, the book, the numbers, the addresses, but he lacked the one thing that mattered: the metadata. He had no way to verify if the truth inside was actually true. He should have hesitated. He knew Bumpy. He knew the man didn't leave doors unlocked. He knew the man didn't leave his life's work sitting on upholstery in plain view. A rational player would have seen the anomaly. A rational player would have walked away. But Vernon wasn't a rational player anymore. He was a victim of confirmation bias. His brain ignored the warning signs because it was too busy feeding him what he wanted to see. He wanted Bumpy to be slipping. He wanted the Luccheses to be right. He wanted the throne. The unlocked door didn't look like a trap. It looked like destiny. He pulled the small camera from his coat pocket. His hands shook, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline of what he thought was victory. Snap. Page 1. Snap. Page 2. The counting house on 147th and Amsterdam. The $40,000. With every click of the shutter, he wasn't stealing secrets. He was confirming his own execution. Bumpy hadn't gambled on Vernon's loyalty. He hadn't flipped a coin. He had manipulated the environment so that Vernon's own ambition would blind him to the obvious. The moment Vernon decided to believe the lie, the probability of his survival dropped to zero. He locked the car. He walked away. He thought he was the hunter, but he had just taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. We tell ourselves a story about betrayal. We say it's about the money. We say Vernon Hode snapped a picture of that ledger because he wanted the throne. But that's too simple. If it was just business, he would have seen the unlocked door for what it was, a giant neon warning sign. A smart man walks away. But Vernon didn't walk away. Why? Because of a glitch in the human operating system known as the Sunk Cost Fallacy. Vernon hadn't just started betraying Bumpy that afternoon. He had been investing in this betrayal for months. Every time he felt slighted, every time he felt smarter than his boss, every time he whispered to Detective Moretti in a dark diner that was a deposit, he had poured so much resentment, so much ego into this plan, that the cost of stopping had become too high. This leads to the second, more dangerous psychological trigger: escalation of commitment. The human brain hates to admit it's wrong. To walk away from that car, Vernon would have to admit that his grand plan was a failure. He would have to go back to being just a numbers runner. He would have to swallow 5 years of pride. His mind couldn't handle that reality. So, it protected him. It blinded him. It told him the unlocked door wasn't a trap. It was destiny. It told him he deserved this luck. When he raised that camera, he wasn't making a new choice. He was following a path he had locked himself into long ago. Bumpy Johnson didn't have to push him. He knew that a man who has already sold his soul will always try to collect the check, even if he has to walk straight into a grave to get it. The warehouse went quiet. Vernon was gone. But Bumpy Johnson's work wasn't finished. You see, catching a rat is easy. Keeping the rest of the ship from sinking? That's the hard part. 3 days later, 3 envelopes arrived at 3 different doorsteps in Harlem. Clarence found his under the morning paper. Maurice got his at the counting house. Delroy found his slipped under the bar door. Inside each envelope was a single page from a ledger, a page full of lies, and a note that was terrifyingly brief. "You passed." Clarence stared at that paper. His hands shook. He hadn't known he was taking a test. He hadn't known that every unlocked door, every loose folder, every moment of Bumpy's carelessness had been a loaded gun pointed at his head. This brings us to the final, most brilliant layer of Bumpy's strategy. Philosophers have a name for this. They call it the **** Panopticon Effect. ***. Imagine a prison where the guard tower is in the center, but the windows are dark. The prisoners can't see the guard. They don't know if he's watching them, or if he's sleeping, or if the tower is completely empty. But because he might be watching, they have to behave as if he is watching. Every second of every day. By sending those notes, Bumpy turned his entire organization into that prison. He didn't just remove a traitor. He installed a permanent surveillance system inside the minds of his loyal men. Clarence drove a little more carefully after that. Maurice counted the money 3 times instead of 2. Not because Bumpy was standing over their shoulders, but because Bumpy had proven that he could be anywhere. He had proven that what looked like an opportunity was actually an audit. The men who survived the test didn't love Bumpy more. They feared him differently. They understood that in his world, safety was an illusion, and loyalty wasn't a choice, it was a survival instinct. That is the ultimate lesson of the fake ledger. Violence is loud. Violence is messy. But true power? True power is invisible. It's building a system where your enemies execute themselves and your friends police themselves. Bumpy Johnson walked slow, but his shadow covered the whole city. And in Harlem, you didn't have to see the man to know he was watching.